Okay, all right. Well, here we are, good to go. And welcome everybody to a special edition, Drones at Dusk. And what an evening it's going to be because we have with us the majority of the board of directors here for the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association, or ULTRA. So, and of course, our fearless leader, Mike Behel from Emerald Expo and Interdrone. He's the behind the scenes wizard. I call him Oz for all my podcasts, but he's showing his face tonight. He's going to help us out. So let's go ahead and walk around the room with maybe 30-second elevator speech introductions. And we'll start ladies first. We'll go with Bronwyn.
Thank you so much, Dawn. So happy to be here this evening. I'm Bronwyn Morgan, and I am the CEO and founder of Zeo Air, an outsourced AI-based drone services, data analytics, and soon to be autonomous operation. And also Airversity, which is a drone pilot academy and geospatial training school, about to open our first location and destination and center of excellence in St. Louis in a couple of weeks. So happy to be here tonight.
Woohoo. And Bronwyn, you also have a podcast, right? Tell us a little bit about
do.
That. Yeah.
It is called ZeoCast. We run on all the top, wherever your podcast channel is, and we talk about all things unmanned and geospatial. And we recently had you on, Dawn.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I was going to tell everybody, if you're not following Bronwyn on LinkedIn or other social media, make sure you do that. She's putting out amazing stuff. And I know, Bronwyn, you asked us to send you bourbon and we didn't tonight. But as we go around the room, if people can just very quickly also, besides introducing themselves, mention their drink of their choice, that would be great. So Brian Leventhal, over to you.
Hey, my name is Brian Leventhal. I'm in public safety in North Carolina. I'm a state trooper with the Highway Patrol. And I got my start in the unmanned world by using drones to map crash scenes. I was on the collision reconstruction unit and helped start our UAV program at the Highway Patrol. And that kind of led me into the next path for my career with the patrol and transferred over to aircraft operations. Now I'm in the manned aviation side of the house and flying helicopters. So still like to get involved and stay active and involved in the unmanned world and kind of blend the two. And I think that's pretty applicable with what we've got going on with this group and what we'll talk about this evening.
Absolutely.
And my drink of choice this evening is Blade and Bow. It's a Stitzel and Weller product. So.
All right. Very good. Very good. It's so nice not being a federal employee where I don't have to say no federal endorsement implied or intended when I talk about my drink, which I'm going to eventually get to. So Ray, let's hear from you, Ray.
Dawn, thank you for having us with your Drones at Dusk / Ultra Happy Hour Bourbon R. This is fantastic. I'm so proud to say that I am the executive director of the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association. And this crew that we have here on this webcast is a spectacular advisory panel that we have. Everybody here is super talented. Dawn, this is probably the best collaborative group of people that I've seen on one of these in a long, long time. I'm a 32-year air traffic controller who is soon to be retired, as announced today, and soon to be ex-federal employee, which would be absolutely fantastic. So I'm so looking forward to that. I'm also, I have a small firm called Low Altitude Operational Solutions. I do, boutique consulting for the urban air mobility space. Done a bunch of stuff over the years, but right now my pride and joy is Ultra, and I'm so happy to be here. So thank you very much, Donna. And my drink of choice is, well, in my Evan Williams glass, is a Woodford Reserve. I went with a traditional bourbon for this first Drones at Dusk Bourbon R.
All right. And oh, by the way, everybody out there, this is just a prequel to what's going to happen in person at Interdrone. So Mike doesn't know this yet, but surprise, we're going to do this live. I can't tell you that we're going to beam it out, but somewhere, in that Hyatt Regency in Dallas, Texas, between 9 and 12 August, we're going to be getting together and we're going to have a flash mob Ultra Bourbon R in some hotel, bar, or nearby facility. So anyway, this is just a prequel. Okay, Ron, over to you.
If I unmute myself here, the technology I'm behind, right? So I'm Ron Leach. I'm the principal of Leach Strategic Partners. What I do is primarily consult with public safety who want to stand up a drone program and how to do it constitutionally and safely. Ray and I had been talking to each other over the years without even really knowing who each other were. Ray being an air traffic controller, my background was New Jersey State Police helicopter pilot. So I'm kind of doing what Brian does in reverse. I started out with the helicopter, now I'm getting back into the drone space. So it all comes 360. Yeah, so Ray and I got together through a mutual friend and started discussing the industry and kind of was looking at what was lacking and maybe we could offer some opinions and give some guidance from the bottom up and not have all the information flow from the top down. So fast forward to Ultra, we got this group together here. We've all been in touch over the months. What is a year and a half now, right? For Ultra's formation, slowly gathering some industry experts, and it's been a lot of fun. Certainly a lot more fun than what I did before. A lot safer, I can tell you that. My drink of choice tonight is Woodford Reserve. Ray didn't tell me ahead of time, and I also wear a black polo, which apparently he's doing. So I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's just a synergy of Ultra working here, right?
Yeah, like I said before we start, I think you guys are starting to morph into each other and look like twinsies, and you're even sharing the same drink. It's a little creepy. All right, Travis Moran, over to you.
Hi, Dawn. Thanks. Always great to be here with you guys. 24-year law enforcement veteran, retired. Have an intelligence services company, which is a whole different thing. But after I retired, I got into the critical infrastructure side of things with energy companies. I was hired out to do counterterrorism for energy companies. And the drone problem evolved about the same time as I retired in terms of exploding onto the consciousness of critical infrastructure back in 2013. And so with that, I've just continued on, particularly with critical infrastructure. And currently I'm the Assistant Deputy Director for Critical Infrastructure Protection it's called the Secure Community Network. We protect faith-based organizations, particularly from the Jewish community nationwide. So the drone piece is obviously very important in a lot of different ways for critical infrastructure. And I got with Ultra as a result of running into Ray at a conference on the Public Safety UAS conference years ago. I mean, it's 4 or 5 years. I don't even know anymore, Ron. And we shared that same passion about this is not being thought of from the ground up. This is being thought of from the sky down. So anyway, that's it. My drink of choice is really, quite honestly, Schmidt's, that wonderful Irish beer. And I went to the fridge. I'm drinking a Coors Light because I found out my son drank the last one. So there you go.
Gotta love sons that are of age to drink. I got a couple of those in the house. All right. And last but not least, Peter Schmidt.
Thank you, Dawn. It's a privilege to be here with the Ultra board. So I had a career as a serial entrepreneur, switched into aviation about a decade ago, joined a company called Linear Air. I'm wearing my crew shirt tonight. I didn't get to fly for Linear Air except on some ferry flights, but I did learn all about operating Part 135 charter operations, especially in the Northeast, in and out of New York airspace, Boston as well, because we're headquartered up in Boston. And I learned about what it takes to make money with aircraft at the scale of the one that we're developing at my new company, which is Transcend Air. So we've got this cool VTOL turbine-powered aircraft. And my team has flown 15 different eVTOL prototypes since 2009, and we're going to market with a turbine. And it really flows from what I learned at Linear Air about how you make money. It really comes down to keeping the seats full and the aircraft in the air. And so we've got a model for doing that where we want to operate flights between cities, Boston, New York, LA, San Diego, Atlanta, Orlando. And so I connected with Ray through LinkedIn because we kept liking each other's posts because he kept saying smart stuff about what reality means for, flying aircraft around New York. And I kept going, yeah, exactly. And apparently he liked a few of mine too. So, the common thread here is this bottoms up reality-based approach to aviation and the trends. And as part of getting involved in Transcend, I got my Part 107 certificate, became a licensed drone pilot, and now up to more than twice as many logged hours of drone flight time as my manned aircraft time. And that was in order so I could be the test pilot for our prototype aircraft for this one, which you can see one of my flight tests. It's a pretty good takeoff.
Look at him. How fancy. Hey, don't pull out all the bells and whistles right now, dude. You're going to be on the podcast next Monday. So let's save some. Let's save some for next week too.
All right.
Yeah, Peter is going to be our guest next week with Transcend Air, talking about his aircraft, the Vi. So absolutely.
Yep, looking forward to that. But anyway, so it's a privilege to be among all these great minds, because my view is that drones are going to drive the revolution in aviation more than anything else. And so I wanted to be a part of that and participate with all you experts in this topic.
All right. So speaking of bottoms up, I kept hearing bottom up, bottoms up. And here's the airplanes, as Peter said, that actually stay in the air. We like those.
Yes.
We like airplanes that stay in the air. Here.
So while we're taking first sips, we got a couple of hellos. We got hi Bronwyn from Women in Drones, and looking forward to a bourbon with this group, also from them. And then we got our friend Ramon Roche from Drone Code. Hey everyone, good seeing you all. Happy streaming.
All right. And Ramon, if I recall correctly, I think Ramon won a People's Choice Award for the Air Awards this year.
He did recently win the Air Awards.
So right back at you, Ramon. Thanks for dialing in. We had a fun Twitter exchange the other day. He was out on the beach complaining about doing admin work. I'm like, dude, you're on the beach. Oh my gosh, Peter Krause has joined us. Hey, buddy. So we got a surprise guest here, and I think now the board members and the advisory board is complete with David here.
Well, that's not completely true, Dawn. We have two others.
Who are we missing?
We've got Jeff Hyman from HHI Heliport.
Okay.
And we also brought on Don Birchoff from True Weather Solutions, who has a fantastic microclimate system, which has to be deployed every place in the country to enable drones to really fly around. So
all right,
he's got some great stuff.
Well, you know what? We'll get him in Dallas. That's what I'll say about that. So anyway, David, give us a quick 30-second elevator speech intro and tell us what you're drinking tonight.
Oh, I don't even know what I'm drinking tonight. Let's see. American Oak. I don't know if anyone could pronounce that. That's what I'm drinking. My name's Dave Krause. I'm the co-owner of Influential Drones. We provide services, training, equipment sales. On task group 8 and 9 of the DAC. I'm the chair of the CompTIA Drone Advisory Committee, and I'm also on the NBA Emerging Technology Committee as well.
All right, so not too shabby credentials there. So let's start with Ultra, and Ray, I'm going to start with you because I know Ron had a big hand in this too, but you really, Ultra's your baby. You founded it. Tell us what the mission is, and what your hopes and dreams are for Ultra going forward.
Well, Ron said it really, really succinctly. We want to bring the operational experience that we've accumulated over decades of aviation to the higher level, the higher order conversation that's out there. We saw a lot of the I like to say in the letter people, PhDs. No offense to anybody who's got a PhD, I don't have one. But fact of the matter is, I've seen over the years the PhDs drop lots and lots of technology and procedural changes down on top of aviation. And then I've noticed I've had to basically take each one of those, rip out the parts that don't work, and then take the stuff that's actually good and make it work. So we wanted to be that voice of reason, that voice, that grounding perspective that actually allowed us to implement these new technologies without having to wait 50 years to do it. Because if we waited for all these high-level concepts to actually come to fruition as one big piece, it would be decades, right? But we see bits and pieces coming out that we can plug in to the puzzle and enable the technology to start working until we can scale it. And then as we scale it, we can start to build out the solutions that are going to allow us to keep it safe and everybody happy. And then eventually we get to that Star Wars-y Jetsons type of thing that everybody likes to put on their websites. But fact of the matter is, the people on this call right here all have that operational perspective and see that. I heard Rob Wiesenthal the other day on a quick YouTube he did, and he had a great statement. He said, we're not trying to be revolutionary, we're trying to be evolutionary. And I think That's a great slogan for Ultra. We are an evolutionary organization that brings great experience as subject matter experts. But on top of that, we've got policy experience, and we can craft the policy to support the existing operations that are out there now, and then the evolutionary operations with eventually going to the revolutionary as the technology emerges and evolves.
Well, awesome. And you know what? I'm going to just chuck the script right out the window, and I'm just going to do a lightning round. Okay, around the horn really quick. What, you just give me one greatest challenge to the implementation of advanced air mobility, urban air mobility. All right, we'll start with Peter first. Go.
Fire codes.
Fire codes. Okay, good one, good one, good one. All weird. There's a lot of weird codes that people don't think about. Because as you said, ground up, right? Infrastructure, fire codes could apply depending on what batteries that you're using, etc. People need, and in fact, I think Rex Alexander just posted up, you know, from 5 Alpha posted up the other day, what is the NPFA? National
NFPA, National Fire Protection Association.
Yeah, they're re-looking at the code in that light. So more to follow there, but that's a good one. All right, Brian, what about you? Biggest challenge?
The FAA.
See, Ray can't see that because he's still employed by them.
So I guess we'll call it regulatory.
Okay, regulatory. You know, that's a great point because you know, I think the UAS integration team got saddled with, hey, AAM, that you guys do that too. And I think they're like, wait a minute, we're still figuring, we don't even have beyond visual line of sight, like draft rule yet, right? So for the small UAS. So I agree. But have you guys seen, and we're going to continue with this question, I'm sorry, I keep interjecting. Have you guys seen that the FAA just asked for, I forget how many millions, 100 million plus in R&D money and plus to basically hire all these additional employees? Well, yeah. I hope they hire people that are write this stuff because that's exactly what we need. And they definitely are undermanned. So I think that'll be important. Okay, let's see. Ray, over to you.
Well, since we're on the topic of FAA and hiring, I'm going to say bureaucracy.
And that's all. Okay. As a former federal attorney, I'm going to advise Ray to speak no further until July 1st after he's officially retired. So
take him longer to fire me.
Bureaucracy it is. Brian, what do you think about challenges here?
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, but I think the other one is the business model. You know, how do you make this work? How does this work for the customer? How does it work for the service, you know, companies and, you know, the manufacturers, so the entire supply chain? But really, what is the business model here? And how is it affordable? You know, because if not, it comes out, it's only for an elite group of people who can afford it. And then things like that don't last. So we've got to figure out how does this work economically? And then provide the real unique value that we say it is.
You know, hold that thought and keep me accountable because I want to circle back after we go around the horn here on that exactly. Ron, okay, challenge.
Kind of carrying on to what Bronwyn was saying, I think unrealistic expectations at the outset there. We'll let it go at that.
Okay, fair enough. Dave, how about you?
Public acceptance.
Yeah, that's a huge hurdle. And I think it plays into what both Bronwyn and Ron said, which is, you know, we're creating solutions. What are the problems that we're solving? Or have people even asked for this? Do they want it? Well, in Europe, it appears they do. If you guys saw that recent report that came out from EASA, public acceptance seems to be pretty high. I think it was 71%. Of course, 71% of how many people? Not sure. But there is that statistics, right? You can make them work however you want. Travis, how about you? Last but not least.
Pivot real quick back to what Peter said. The heliports on the fire marshal part, the fire marshals control the heliports. That's going to be huge. And the one I think we continually overlook on all the drone stuff is the intersectionality of cargo and AAM. Right? It's once the real value is going to be in cargo. And figuring out that space and the public acceptance, just like Dave talked, there will be more trips on cargo than there will be of people once this scales in 20 years. So anyway.
Well, I would agree, and I would say absolutely initially, because they're not going to throw people into aircraft before they know they can move the cargo, just like with manned aircraft. And I think we moved mail first, if I recall correctly. By the way, I failed to give some props to my home state. The drink I'm drinking tonight is Breckenridge Distilleries Reserve Blend here. So go Colorado. And I will add a challenge to everything you all said related to, in part, the vertiport and the different authorities, like Peter mentioned, the fire code. I'm going to throw just fuel on the fire, no pun intended there, and say avigation rights. You know, like this is a again, fire code, hot topic. It's a super hot topic because, you know, where does, as Ron and Ray said, the ground end and the sky begin for who's supposed to be regulating what? You know, it's a constitutional issue. I mean, I hear a lot of people spouting off about this, which drives me nuts because they're like, oh, you know, and they're making policy arguments that are not legal arguments. Well, in the courts, they're going to look at law first, and they're going to start with the Constitution. By the way, I have an article coming out of on this topic soon in Inside Unmanned Systems magazine. So check it out. I've jumped a little bit into the fray, although I have to say I stayed kind of neutral. I do have my own opinions, and I don't have enough of this in me to tell you what those are. All right. So going back to Bronwyn, you made that comment about.
Actually, Dawn, just want to say hello to a few people who have been commenting. So we've got a live chat. We got hello from Chicago from Sharon Rossmark. Do you know drones says that's a great bourbon.
Woohoo!
Scott has said cheers from Texas, and his quote is federalism being a barrier. And I'd also like to add infrastructure, right? So do we have infrastructure in place, or do we have to retrofit current infrastructure to accommodate AAM?
Yeah, and you know, Mike, infrastructure is also the topic du jour, right? With President Biden's Build Back America plan and multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill bubbling through. Everybody's trying to get a place at the trough, and you know, certainly the R&D community and the AAM community looking at infrastructure. Definitely big groups that are looking at that. So back to Bronwyn's comment. And by the way, Scott, hey, Jason Sansucci, he's do you know drones? Some other folks out there. Great, thanks for dialing in. Back to Bronwyn's point earlier about this idea of what is the right model, you know, kind of, I think you alluded to it, maybe indirectly, accessibility, elitism. And I don't know how many people have read this paper that I hear is making its rounds through the halls of DC and Congress. It's from March of 2020, you know, think tank type piece that basically calls advanced air mobility elitist, undemocratic, basically just purely for the rich. And, oh, by the way, also environmentally completely unfriendly. And how many people on the horn, just give me a hand raise, have read that piece? All right, so those that have read it, what are your thoughts? And I'm not going to call them people, so go ahead, Ray, shout out.
Sure. You know, I think I've said this before. I read that piece a couple days ago, and you have to understand that who wrote it, right? You have to look at which think tank it came from, which you always have to put everything in context when these white papers come out. To me, it was a sort of a propaganda piece. It was it was strictly meant to persuade in one direction. It was not a neutrally grounded piece. You know, some of the art, not that I disagree with every single piece of information in that, but some of it was spun pretty heavily, you know, and dragged a bunch of the socioeconomic problems that the country has into this topic. And I really think that for as much as, yeah, people could say that aviation, some forms of aviation may be to some extent elitist. Like, you know, we see a number of Sikorskys and Augustas flying back and forth to the Hamptons out of, you know, New York and New Jersey. And I personally don't fly on those. But do I want to, you know, take that away from the people that can? No, I don't. I mean, it's great that they can do it. And the fact of the matter is, from what we're looking at with eVTOL and even VTOL, like what Peter's doing, it's more of, I hate to say democratization, but it just comes to mind. Everybody is trying to drive prices down because the market expands at that point. So I don't see this as a form of elitism. I see it as just a different mode of transportation akin to the the airplane back in the day when that came and expanded transportation options for everybody. But maybe some people won't be able to afford it. But the fact of the matter is, I don't drive a Bentley, right? Would I like to drive a Bentley? Yeah, but I don't drive a Bentley. So should should Bentleys be taken out of existence because I don't drive a Bentley? No, it shouldn't. So I really think that it was definitely heavily spun. I know I kind of went off a little bit on a tangent on that, but really,
Yeah.
We don't need pieces like that. We need pieces that are going to be advance the actual economic benefit of the technology while the industry addresses some of the ills that do come along with transportation, such as emissions and economic costs.
It's
Peter
a really
is chomping at the bit
I'm
here.
chomping at the bit, yeah.
You are. But before you get to that, I just want to say, like, I was laughing out loud because I feel like it was in like paragraph 1 where the author's like, there's at least 20 companies making these airplanes right now. And I'm thinking, holy shikes, they really, like, right up front, I'm like Vertical Flight Society's like eVTOL directory at that time last year in 2020 was over 300 different designs. Now, granted, all of them are not being produced, right? Some of them are prototypes, but to say there's like 20 right there, that kind of dinged credibility for me. But go ahead, Peter.
So I want to tie this to what Bronwyn said, and also tie it to the first Uber Elevate. The first Uber and what Dave said about public acceptance. It all comes together. There needs to be a model that benefits the general public in order for them to accept the impacts that come from this new mode of travel. And so that model has to deliver a service, whether it's cargo or whether it's personal transportation, at a price that makes sense to them for their need. And if you don't get that, then all that's left is elitism, right?
Yeah.
That's the big challenge.
And how do we drive that demand? And I think it's as we start in this industry, and Dawn, I think just said it will be cargo first, just for all the safety reasons and public acceptance. And so that model, I think, can make a lot of sense, in this kind of short range transportation model. And then as that becomes, more evident and companies
100%.
start to recognize that revenue, then, as we get into the people movement, people feel a lot more comfortable with it. But yeah, that model, because you got to look at all your routes and that all that infrastructure, how does it all come together to make it reasonable for, it's not just people going to the airport. How does it become a reasonable, viable vertical within the industry?
So
no pun intended there on vertical. I love it.
Vertical.
So Travis, you look like you're doing the finger tent and you're looking like leaning forward. I'm reading the body language. Go for it.
Americans like cheap stuff. So when you can scale cargo costs down and show them that they can get products, goods, and services, whether it's going to point, B2B versus to a home, and it keeps their costs down and scalable, versus then you tie that to emissions from fossil fuel burning trucks and regular jets and things of that nature. You've undercut both of those two big arguments, right? So I'm still keeping my prices low. And this is a generation that's going to, and the generations in the future, which is this is a 10 to 20 year argument, are going to be very concerned about emissions. Mm-hmm. You're hitting both of those needles. Then it's much easier to get that public acceptance piece, not just for that, but then for the scalability on humans, which is where Peter wants to be.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think this industry has a PR problem. Look, we're all here, we're sipping our bourbon, we all know each other and we know this industry. And I can tell you, like, if I talk to my neighbors down the street, they're not going to have any idea what we're talking about, because all they see in the media are negative portrayals, first of drones, right? Do you guys remember that commercial? And I feel like it was for some insurance company, possibly.
It was a car commercial where they were,
yeah, it's like the end of a business day. They're all like huddled in the lobby, and then
horde
like,
of drones in a glass building, and they're running away.
Like, and it's just like, with that. And I heard in the new Tom Cruise movie, spoiler alert, by the way, the bad guy is a drone or something, or there's drones. You know, I mean, this is just, so my question is, how do we get the good word out when the media really just wants to consume the bad stories because that's what sells? We don't sell papers anymore, but you know what I'm saying. That's what people, that's what's sexy, right? That's what people want to read about because, oh my gosh, it's like it feeds into people's fears, and it makes them, it gets them more clicks. What is, how do we fix that? Around the horn, anybody?
So, in my opinion, it all comes down to teamwork. This industry, and we can draw the parallel to the unmanned systems with drones in general. We're all working against each other instead of together. If we come in with more of a unified voice, the industry can speak for itself, and we can promote together and get this industry to grow. If we all compete against each other, we're just going to be spinning our wheels.
Yeah,
and it's just going to slow everything down.
I agree with that to an extent, but I have a problem with some of the people in the industry who are promoting things that are not possible.
Well, you're going to get that when the industry doesn't have a unified voice, people are going to stand up and basically say, okay, I'm the authority. And whether they're right or they're wrong, they're the voice that's going to be heard.
Well, a lot of other industries,
especially in today's social society.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But yeah, a lot of other industries aren't facing up against the hard reality of keeping our skies safe, right? So other industries are able to evolve with that layer of BS, and it's actually not a detriment to it. But for us, it's a detriment because every time we get caught on that, you're either making the air less safe, you're scaring the regulator back into their bureaucratic hole, and we kind of need that hype layer though. So we haven't been able to balance that since 2017, I don't think, when excitement was kind of at its peak.
Brian's got the finger tent going.
Yeah, so I went with the Travis finger tent to see if I could get in there for a second.
Signaling like, and the forward leaning. Very good.
Yeah, forward leaning. There you go. So I think it's important to have groups like what we've got here with Ultra. So, I mean, we've got people from, active public safety like myself, retired public safety like Ron, entrepreneurs like Peter and Bronwyn. It's important to get groups like that together that bring this wide, diverse group from the community to feed in all the different voices and kind of make a fit the pieces of the puzzle together and bring that unified voice. And I think that's going to be a huge part in
and God forbid the lawyers, right?
So you've got to have lawyers too.
And hey Don, I'd love to add too, I think those of us that have platforms, podcasts and streaming that are able to bring a balanced perspective to what's going on, both the safety aspects, the reality of it, as also, the innovation of what's happening, and all these different voices help educate people. Because, I've got people coming out of the woodworks calling me like, hey, I'm getting into the business, but I want to know more. And it's like, that's great. I'm like, well, you've got to do it responsibly. You just can't be out flying willy-nilly, or you want to do things to Peter's perspective that I'm like, that's not a thing yet. It's like that, and that's not going to happen in 6 months. That's just not a thing. So meter your innovation. We don't want to stop it, but you've got to know the basic rules first before you jump off into oblivion.
You said a word right there that is near and dear to my heart, education. And I know that's something that's also a passion of Ron's, because he's involved at Rutgers University, and he was actually a guest speaker at my class at CSU Pueblo. So that was pretty awesome. But education is absolutely key. And one other thing I'll say, maybe I'll sound like I'm backtracking just like a lawyer, right? Depends. What I will say is that COVID, if it's done anything, I think has produced a couple of good drones for good stories out there that perhaps in another environment, another time, another place wouldn't have been possible. Things like delivery of medicines to people through drones, or COVID testing kits, and things of that nature. I think, when you think about those use cases that are going to, whether it's advanced air mobility and cargo, I think those use cases that are going to benefit society, that people can glom onto as this is meaningful and important, are the ones that are going to propel the industry. Whether it is wildland firefighting, and use of these kind of vehicles in support of that, which is something I'm working with the Advanced Mobility Collective on here in Colorado, and they're in other states as well. Healthcare, I think, is a big one. Brian, I'm going to hit you up because I think the law enforcement piece of this, and of course, Ron can speak too to this, and Travis, all three of you. I think there were some bad news stories that came out of law enforcement's use of drones during COVID and otherwise. What advice would you, whether it was like the temperature taking foul, that happened in Connecticut that they pulled the plug on shortly after they started? What advice would you give to public service agencies to help, kind of flip the script and have a positive news story out of how they're using these technologies? Because, by the way, advanced air mobility, I can think of all kinds of things like search and rescue on the battlefield, personnel recovery, all kinds of awesome things, applications that will save lives. What do you think, Brian? How do we change that narrative in the public safety arena?
So a couple of things. I think it's important for public safety agencies. They need to, especially if they're getting new and just starting a program, need to kind of utilize a crawl, walk, run. So, don't try and go headlong into operations, kind of start out small and scale up from there. One of the main focus for us at the Highway Patrol was we were using drones to map crash scenes. So pretty much everyone is universally accepting of that. We're trying to open up the roads faster. We're trying to protect ourselves as officers and troopers out in the road, so that we can not have to stand out with the moving traffic. Just trying to find ways that are accepting of the general public. And it goes back to that PR piece we were talking about.
So let me ask you that though, Brian. Did your department actually use that information and make a good positive news story out of it to show how quickly the highway was opened up, how lives were possibly saved because they can move people through more rapidly, et cetera?
Yeah. So again, going back to the crawl, walk, run, before we even purchased our first drone, we partnered with North Carolina Department of Transportation. That the Aviation division has a UAS component to it, and partnered with them and did a study where we did a mock crash, then mapped the scene with the equipment we were currently using. DOT used their drones to map the crash scene and kind of compared both the accuracy and the time to map so that we could kind of show the benefit of using that tool. So it's important to kind of, again, take those steps. And once we did that, once we started building our program, we had media events where we invited the media out there to see what we were doing, show everyone, the benefits to using this technology in public safety. And believe it or not, we actually got calls from people that had drones that they had purchased in the past, some older DJI Phantoms that were sitting in their closet that they said they wanted to donate them to help our program out. So it does have positive impacts.
No, that's great. And, I think I'm going to hit Travis up next because he dropped something in the chat here, about finite use cases key, that there's this overblown fear of a surveillance state. Well, let's be honest. I mean, like the last couple of years, you had some groups of people out there, some people are going to call them protesters, others are going to call them rioters, depending on your perspective. But, there were large drones up there, surveilling them and probably using facial recognition. And that freaks people out. I mean, and maybe rightfully so, right? Because if they were peaceful protesters, hypothetically speaking, then why are you mapping their faces, right? So Travis, tell us your thoughts.
Brian hit the nail on the head for the argument for adoption is finite use cases that make sense. Ron knows this better than anybody. We're moving across the country at record speed about having now clamped down. It's going to take warrants to use drones for any kind of even minor curtilage intrusions, which is really going to put some inhibitors on some of the infrastructure because, electric companies flying lines, even if they get a waiver, are collecting a lot of video imagery, and that gets into that whole whammy argument of wide area motion imagery, which is what you're talking about. So, the public acceptance piece, surveillance state is driving, even from your advertising IDs off your phones right now, that's driving the argument. So the positive use cases to chip away at that have to be finite and targeted, to Brian's point.
Well, and we're talking about a lot of things here. I mean, we're kind of conflating drones and advanced air mobility, and some people would really object to the idea that advanced air mobility or larger aircraft like what Peter has are really drones, right?
They're going to have sensors. They're going to have sensors.
But you know what? They're going to have sensors. And, we face that in the Air Force because you know what? The F-15s, as they fly overhead and they're doing training, they got targeting pods and they need to use them to see what they're doing, right? And to train. But it wasn't those aircraft that people cared about. It was the drones and the drones alone. So it'll be interesting, and how this plays out in the long run and how this will affect advanced air mobility, what happens in the drone arena.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons why I'm here. If people have bad experiences with drones flying overhead, when my aircraft appears, that's going to be what they think of, right? So it's a significant concern. It gets back to, do you have a model that people think benefits them? And are they hearing that they're being benefited? Do they know that? And so Dawn actually asked you, Brian, did you promote that you're protecting troopers and opening highways faster with that? Did you think to? Like, that's something we should be doing. We should be thinking of how can we promote those positive, concrete stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Bronwyn's got her.
Yeah. Well, and I think a huge distinction here is that F-15's new aircraft has a different model. One is government run, the other one is a corporate or business entity. Drones are in the hands of anybody that can go buy one. And so now my personal space is potentially violated, and not by someone who is a professional. And I don't even know what professional means in this arena if I'm not in it, right? What's a Part 107? I don't know what that means. So anybody, my neighbor who's not Part 107, he's like, hey, I've been flying my drone. I'm like, oh, no, not there. You're going to get yourself in trouble. So people, rightfully so, were concerned, drones flying by their windows and people, who are not responsible looking in. So how do we regulate the consumer use of these, especially those who are hobbyists? And that's where, things like remote ID will become a really big part of what we do moving forward, because this is where they're nervous. But to be honest, this phone is actually, once we got into that compromised your identity and everything else more than people realized.
Man, we could talk for hours about remote ID, and we're kind of getting close to the end. Mike, you have
we got a couple of comments actually I want to bring in. So we got a hello from Desiree Eckstein. She seems to be a regular. She's joining Scott in the high ranks of showing up every episode. We've got Dave Dahlia. Majority of the drones will use for delivery. Which sectors will benefit the most from drones? So that's a question. And Scott again, multiple large public safety programs have also publicly vetted their policies and procedures. General open dialogue is helpful.
Transparency is key, absolutely. But to that question about what will the use cases be, let's just say for cargo, Dave, what are you thinking?
As far as what the use cases will be for cargo, there's a whole bunch of opportunities there. The most common one is the one we all know about, which is down in Wake Med, which them transferring the blood work back and forth.
Yeah, lab work for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I had the privilege of seeing that firsthand, and it is pretty impressive. They're running by the hour, and just the way that they are, have the whole thing organized is it's inspiring, because it shows what the industry could potentially do with it. You have other testing centers that are doing the transport of organs and stuff like that. These are the ways of giving you that feel good feeling. That is the things that are the things that the industry needs right now. If we're going to grow, we all need to feel good about what we're doing. But we can talk about the Amazons, we can talk about everything else, but I mean, really, I think the organ transplant and anything relating to medical is where we need to be right now, because everybody is accepting of that.
Well, and you see, I think Zipline, when you talk about PR, I think Zipline's done a phenomenal job of tooting their own horn and what they've been able to accomplish in Africa. And oh, by the way, that wasn't easy, right? Like everybody thinks, oh, it's like they don't have any regs. They're just out there doing it. Well, no, they actually, because they didn't have regs in some of those countries, had to work very closely with air traffic control and the governments to like put something in place that didn't exist. So, kind of a big deal. Agree, healthcare will be a big one. Let's take the top two other ones. Anybody that wants to yell in, and then I want to do a lightning round on something else before we dial out. So Ray, you unmuted first.
Yeah,
I don't know. I didn't see Brian's finger tent. I saw Ray unmute, so we're going with Ray.
That's right. See, I like just threw myself into that.
You did, man. Go.
Yeah. Real quickly, we're seeing a lot of interest in the VTOL space from the cargo operators. We're seeing the Amazons and the UPSs step in, not just to build their own. I know, UPS is working with a few companies, but in the UAM space, they're throwing money at larger vehicles to move cargo between their drop-offs. Let's call it their endpoints from their main hubs, which would be for UPS, Louisville, or Memphis for FedEx, into airports, which are their regional hubs, and then from those regional hubs out to distribution centers. So there's a big cargo push there, a lot of money coming in there. And then, the drone aspect would probably come in from the distribution centers out to the edges of communities. But that's the model I see coming. Other than that, I mean, I don't know how, I get the medical thing, and that's great. And it's really easy to sell that. But fact of the matter is, that's not where the money's going to be. It's a very limited case. So now moving, there's some, but Amazon's not selling, that many test kits for blood samples or COVID. It's all the other stuff that they've got to move. Oh, Peter's hold on. I got to.
Hey, Ray, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to let Peter go, but I think it's going to be a network solution, and it's a mobility solution that's for healthcare. That's going to not just involve, flying lab tests around. It's going to be network. There's going to be the healthcare, the ground vehicles, all of it's going to be connected in a way that you've never seen before. And I think that's what the use case is going to be. Peter, what do you think?
So I'm going to be a futurist for a second and say, I think an obvious last 100 yards application will be picture little cubicle shaped brown UPS trucks that are all electric and they're autonomous and they drive at night. So they're silent. There's nobody else on the roads. They don't have to be super sophisticated. It doesn't matter if people bully them and they have to stop. They just go down your street quietly. Drone lifts off, drops the package on your front stoop and moves along. And it recharges on the truck. I just can't believe this is not going to be the ubiquitous way. And, it's too bad for the UPS drivers who are currently hustling up and down your front yard. But I think that's coming. And so I think
complaints about flying at nighttime, the buzz, you're waking me up.
Yeah,
that's right. Too loud. The noise.
Well, yeah, no, that's always an issue, Ron, right? That's always an issue. But, if I'm flying the thing and recharging often, I can put big rotors on it and make it awful quiet. It doesn't have to be a little quadcopter with high frequenzy props, right? We can solve that from an engineering perspective.
I do have to say I had a bee in my house the other day and I'm like, gosh, that thing is loud. Those little wings, they go so fast. They're so loud. Brian, what do you have? And then we're going to do the lightning round.
I've had about 4 different things I didn't chime in on, but I had different ideas. But
give us one. Give us one.
So I think Dave mentioned the medical package delivery here in North Carolina. So I'm going to touch on that one. So speak to my home state. So that was the big part that DOT was a part of with the FAA's IPP. And it's kind of opened the door and expanded from there. So we've got other package delivery going on in North Carolina, not just the UPS Flight Forward.
Yeah, like Flytrex is out there.
Flytrex, Zipline,
and groceries.
So as we were talking earlier, we said, the delivering cargo is going to be what leads to delivering people eventually, where Peter comes in. And then, I did want to touch on something we mentioned earlier with Peter, and we were talking about how drones flying overhead and public acceptance, with smaller drones, I get where people get that kind of, little nervous about who's watching me. But for somebody like Peter, do you think you have an advantage that yours is a little larger and more like an aircraft, and people are already used to seeing something like that? And
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Bronwyn said it. It's like it's obviously a professional organization operating these larger aircraft, and people have a pretty good trust in the FAA, despite Ray's deciding to quit. They think that if it's a regulated professional aircraft, it's safe, so they don't kind of worry about that. But they don't like the noise, and so you better be offering them some real value in exchange for that noise.
So I don't understand people that don't like aircraft noise. I think it sounds amazing.
Well,
yeah, I am with you, absolutely.
This is what you do for your life, so you love it. I live right outside the Air Force Academy, and they have those little, those T-38s or whatever, they're flying the little training planes. They sound no louder than, they're quieter than a lawnmower, and you still have neighbors out with pitchforks like, the noise. It's like, seriously, it's nothing. Anyway, okay, so for our last lightning round here, here's what I want to ask you guys. We kind of alluded to it, this idea that, there's rules, people should know the rules. That's step one, of course, right? There's what you should do. There's what you can and cannot do. And then there's what you should do. So let's get for a second into ethics, right? Like, so if you all were making a code of ethics for whether it be smaller drones or for Peter, the larger advanced air mobility, give us one precept, one concept that you would include in that code of ethics. And before I get there, I do want to share a quick story because this really annoyed me, and this is true. My husband and I were just walking our dogs down our street. This was, a couple months ago, before really COVID started. Maybe people got shots on board and more people out and about. So it was kind of quiet, like not a lot of people out. We're walking our dogs down the street, and there's this quadcopter following us, like deliberately, like down the entire length of the street. And it annoyed me because I'm like, what the crap? Like, clearly they're not within visual line of sight because I could not see the operator anywhere. So I took out my phone and I pretended to take a picture of it because I really didn't, because I didn't really want the picture. And I just said really loud, like, that's clearly illegal because it's not within visual line of sight. And all of a sudden it took off. But I was just like, come on, man. Like, so here's my question. What ethical rules should people follow? What are the things they should be doing, even if it's not written in a regulation? I'm going to go with Bronwyn first.
Yeah, if you're not operating as a professional operator, you have no personal, you should not be able to fly over and capture data about people personally. If you just fly recreationally over a park or, in any of these areas that are designated, that's fine. But you have no right to fly over people and capture data and pictures and video that's not being used for any professional type of service.
Interesting, because back to your cell phone comment, I think people would say, well, I can just be out on the street taking all kinds of pictures of people, like even in a selfie where we're getting people in the background, and we accept that. But no, it's an interesting comment. So, all right, so an ethical rule for recreational flyers, non-professionals, is don't be capturing imagery unless you have a good reason. I think that's a general good rule for everybody, actually, unless you have a really good reason. Brian, what do you think?
I'm going to speak to the law enforcement community.
Sure.
Don't become case law. So,
as a lawyer, I'll drink to that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so don't think about your operations and what you're doing. If there's a little voice in the back of your head that's kind of speaking to maybe this isn't quite right, then it's probably when you need to put the brakes on. So just kind of be cautious, have policy, stick to the policy, make sure you're any case law that's in your state, adhere to the Constitution, all that good stuff. Just don't
adhere to the Constitution. Amen. And that's Bader Ginsburg right there.
There you go.
Okay. So let's see, Ray, go.
Well, listening to this, I was just thinking what Brian said, right? So the little voice in the back of your head, that little voice in the back of your head speaks differently to everybody. So, and also that
like an 8 ball
evolves through time.
Does it look like an 8 ball?
Only if it's on Ray's desk. So go
So-
ahead, he falls over time.
Go
So-
search Ray's LinkedIn post for that reference.
You do.
so, I lost my train of thought. So no, but seriously, so I don't know. Ethics is kind of a funny thing, right? And it's been proven out over the last decade or so. I don't know how you codify right and wrong easily. I mean, ethics kind of derives from, all these, I'll just go there, all religious teachings and stuff like that about what you should do. But fact of the matter is, if you shouldn't do it without a drone, you probably shouldn't do it with a drone.
That's a great point. And I will take exception being a philosophy major. Ethics really harkens well before a lot of religious precepts, and like the Greek philosophers, I don't think many of them were very religious, but they did talk a lot about character and habit, like Aristotle, and this idea that actions over time create become habit, form your character. So I love that. It's almost like when it's what you do when people aren't watching. That's what your character is. And it's just like what you said. If you shouldn't do it without a drone, why are you doing it just because you have a drone? That dovetails on what Brian said too. So good stuff. All right, Ron, how about you?
Transparency, whether you're public, private, whatever you're doing, you should be open about it. I was interviewed by a local Philadelphia station talking about drone use drone use by public safety to shout out COVID messages. And we I'm going to speak as Americans, we're not ready for the robotic voice to shout orders at us. We need to be open. If we want to go and develop this technology, there's a lot of people that probably don't want us to do what we're doing. So you got to be open. Here's our policies. Here's what we do with pictures we don't need. What does that destruction schedule look like? Even if it's a realtor or a roofing inspector, you want to be a professional. You need to be able to be open about what it is you're doing. So if somebody does have a question, you can answer that, and not I don't know.
Yeah,
it's all about professionalism as well.
No, it is, and I think the converse of transparency is people just think you're hiding something, right? And that just increases suspicion. So no, great nugget there, transparency. How about you, Dave?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves of the industry right now is the fact that people are flying higher than they should. So, to me, it's a question of, why are you here? Our company's now the national reps for the FAA safety team. And I'm also a course manager for FAAsafety.gov, and they keep asking me to do a presentation on it. And I'm trying to figure out how to actually present why are you here without coming across as being the drone police, which is the pushback that a lot of people give, instead of just accepting the fact that they shouldn't be flying so high.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so that's an easy one. Just actually follow the rules. Like, so and when you talk about transparency, I think sometimes explaining to people why the rule exists, people have, oh, we need BVLOS, well, we have visual line of sight with small drones for a reason, because the see and avoid requirement that applies to manned aircraft, VLOS is the next best thing for unmanned. That's why it exists, right? Blah, blah, blah. But once you kind of walk somebody through, it's like the light bulb comes on, like, okay, that makes sense. They're not just throwing up roadblocks. They're not just throwing up these random requirements. So obviously it's a safety issue why there's a ceiling there for small UAS in particular. So that's a good one, Dave. Thanks. All right, two more, and then we got to roll. So Peter, go.
The ethic I'd propose for both smalls and larges is inclusivity. Right? I think that's one of the things that's most exciting to me, actually, about the emergence of the drone industry. Is it's much more inclusive than traditional aerospace. And I mean that economically, I mean that racially, I mean that by gender. And that's a really exciting thing to me. But at the high end, as people are developing concepts for novel, drone-based vertical takeoff and landing kind of aircraft, it needs to be inclusive of everybody. Whether you can't be building aircraft that disabled people can't get into, for example. And inclusivity also means listening to the people that you're affecting, right? Include them in the conversation about your service, about the impact on them, about their benefit. I think that's the key ethic for me.
Well, and that's the best way also to win public acceptance, right? When people have a say in the process, they tend to be more likely to have buy-in into that, right? That's just leadership 101. So good stuff, Peter. Thank you. And Travis, last but not least.
I'll be quick because I know we're butting up against time. So from the organizational ethics, I'm going to pivot back to where Dave was talking about being the FAA, being the drone police. You were on that, obviously, that webinar where I asked that question a week or so ago, Dawn, and we got that standard, just ridiculous answer about, oh, we're going to take care of the privacy of the packets. No. Transparency about how you're going to make this work, thinking downstream on once an operator is identified or however that's going to work with CGIS and getting that data back and forth quickly. It's not about the operator security, but be transparent about it and start thinking and talking about it. Start talking about it. Being ethical from the bureaucratic side. That's it.
Oh yeah, he's talking about the remote ID webinar that was the other day. We were like, I'll just leave it at that. We want to end on a high note. So Mike, do you have anything you want to add before we close it out?
Maybe thinking in terms of ethics of data privacy. So like we kind of danced around it a lot with everybody else's comment, but how is this data being archived? I mean, I heard the comment about, when is it destroyed, access to that data to have it destroyed. So if you're a regular commercial operator and you're collecting that data, you might run afoul of, some private citizen who's, just tangentially interacting with your construction site. And I don't think we've worked out all the puzzles around that. But I know in the public safety arena, that certainly is a topic of discussion that officials don't always think about. And it's one of the easiest ways to show goodwill with the public if you let them know what the process is for accessing that data.
Yeah, it is. And we don't have to reinvent wheels here, right? So the NTIA in 2016 had a multiple stakeholder group, and they put out some best practices on UAS privacy. By the way, those track intelligence oversight rules. Executive Order 12333, collection, retention, dissemination, oversight, and approval authority. I mean, it's really that simple. If you follow those pillars, good to go. So, all right, well, this is a wrap. I want to thank everybody. So one last cheer here to the Ultra group. Thank you so much for joining in. Everybody out there, thanks for joining us. And like I said, join us live at Interdrone in Dallas, Texas, 9 through 12 August. This crew is going to be there, so beware. And not only that, but for those on Clubhouse, join Peter and me and hopefully some of these other folks on Thursday, 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern at the Drone Law Connections room. And then next Monday on the Normal Drones at Dawn podcast, we've got Peter back to talk a little bit more deeply about the amazing stuff he's doing at Transcend Air. That's every Monday, 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern. So without further ado, thank you so much out here. Have a great evening. Cheers.